The Legacy Superhero Season 2, Episode 3, Into the Shadows. At midnight that night, when I heard Uncle Josh snoring loudly in the room across the hall and made sure that Mom and Dad were both sound asleep, I donned my trick-shot costume and flew out to downtown Rumsfeld to the scene of the assassination of Baron Glory. It was dangerous to fly around Rumsfeld at all times of day, even at night due to the presence of so many streetlights, but nighttime was still the best time for me to be active, because most people slept at night, and those few people who remained awake were generally not focused on the sky. Rumsfeld didn't have much of a nightlife, so to speak. In less than an hour, I landed on the rooftop of the apartment building where the assassin had taken his shot and looked around quickly. I was all alone up here, with nary a soul in sight, but I still made sure to move as quietly as I could toward the door, because I didn't want to wake up the people inside the apartment building. Luckily, the roof door was unlocked, so I opened it and slipped inside as carefully as I could, closing the door silently behind me on the way in. I found myself at the top of a spiral staircase that opened out into a hallway below. The hallway lights were on, but as far as I could tell, there was no one down there at the moment. Most likely, all of the inhabitants of the building were sleeping soundly, so I carefully made my way down the stairs one step at a time, pausing every second step to make sure that no one was going to wake up and hear me. But I heard nothing, aside from the humming of the air conditioning, and I soon reached the hallway itself. It wasn't hard to spot the door to the room where the sniper had shot from. It was blocked off with yellow police tape that said crime scene. The door itself was not locked, from what I could tell, and luckily there were no police officers nearby. I could hardly believe my luck. T.W. had expressed doubts about whether I'd be able to enter the crime scene when I told him the idea earlier. But I had insisted that it would be easy for me to do, and it looked like I was about to be proved right. I quickly made my way down the hallway, listening to the sounds of snoring and loud TVs coming from doors on either side of the hallway. It sounded like some people weren't entirely asleep, but perhaps they just left their TVs on and fell asleep watching them. In any case, I reached the police tape quickly and went under it. As I suspected, the door was not locked. I opened the door, entered the room, and closed it in one swift motion, stopping briefly in order to listen to the hallway outside for any sounds. I did not hear any other doors open, which meant that none of the other apartment dwellers had heard me enter. It was a relief to realize that. "See T.W.," I muttered under my breath. I did sneak in without being heard. "I see that," said T.W., though he didn't sound very happy to me. "Are you just going to stand around and gloat about it to me, or are you going to start searching the apartment?" Unable to hide my smile, I said, "Of course. Why else do you think I came here?" I looked around the apartment I had just entered. It appeared to be a one-bedroom apartment, and a nice one at that. The living room area had nice carpeted floor, with a comfy black sofa and footstool set in front of a large widescreen TV. A small kitchen area stood off to the right, complete with a fridge and sink, the fridge humming quietly in the darkness of the night. The door to the bathroom stood closed beside the kitchen, while the bedroom door stood off on the opposite end of the room, and, directly before me, were the windows from which the sniper had fired his gun. I made my way over to the windows, because that was where the sniper had fired his gun, so if he had left any evidence, it would have to be there. I stopped before the windows and studied them more closely. They were two tall, nearly full-body windows affording an excellent view of downtown Rumsfeld. I could see the Rumsfeld courthouse from here, as well as the cars that made their way downtown going who knows where. But Rumsfeld was far quieter tonight than usual. I only saw a handful of pedestrians who might have been drug dealers based on the way they furtively moved. I also saw a cat slinking among some trash cans, but other than that, downtown Rumsfeld was very quiet tonight. As for the windows themselves, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, aside from a couple of footprints in the carpet that obviously belonged to the sniper. There was also a little gunpowder, but it was too little for me to use as evidence for anything other than the obvious fact that the sniper had been here, which was a fact I already knew. A cockroach scurried across the windowsill, but I paid it no attention. "It doesn't look like there's much to see in here," said T.W. "Assuming the assassin even left any clues behind, they were probably already found and confiscated by the police. So, unless your next brilliant idea is to break into the police headquarters next, we should probably go home before Uncle Josh or your parents find out you're missing." "Come on, T.W., I said in a low voice. "Everyone back home is still asleep. And since this apartment is still cordoned off by the police, I doubt anyone will accidentally walk in on us. I'm going to search the bedroom. There might be some clues in there." Turning around, I walked over to the bedroom door and opened it. Poking my head inside, I found a single queen-sized bed, along with a chest of drawers, another TV, and several bookshelves full of books and knickknacks. Like the rest of the apartment, there were no people in here, so I stepped inside and started looking more closely at everything. But like with the windowsill outside, I had little luck. The place was as clean as the day it had been built, maybe even cleaner, with the result being that I had to concede to TW's point about the police doing a clean sweep of the place earlier that day. It made sense. The police always cleaned up a crime scene, taking whatever clues or evidence they could find and taking it away with them back to their headquarters for further examination. This entire idea of breaking into the apartment to search for that one piece of evidence which the police had somehow overlooked was starting to seem more and more absurd even to me. Stepping out of the bedroom, my shoulders slumped. You know, TW, I think you might be right about this idea. It seems like the Rumsfeld City Police Department did a good job of cleaning this place up. Which is precisely why we should go home now, said TW. I know you want to prove your innocence, but returning to the scene of the crime, even at night like this, is a risky way to do it. Okay, I said, but first, I want to check the bathroom. Maybe the killer forgot to flush and I can use his crap to identify him or something. I don't find toilet humor particularly humorous, Jack. I ignored TW's comment. I walked across the apartment to the bathroom door, which, like every other door I'd tried in here, was unlocked. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside the bathroom and looked around. It was a pretty small bathroom, with a small walk-in shower off to one side and a toilet and sink on the other. Fluffy white towels were stacked neatly on a shelf above the toilet, while an array of women's beauty products stood on the sink countertop like soldiers ready for marching orders. Looks like this must be a girl's apartment, I muttered. Wonder if she's hot. She's probably staying somewhere else right now, given how her apartment is being treated as a crime scene, said TW. You always know how to suck the fun out of things, don't you? I said. Anyway, let me check this place out. It's not very big, so it shouldn't take me long to find any clues. I yanked open the mirror, only to find another set of women's beauty products, which made me wonder just how much money this woman had spent on beauty products. I knew my mom loved to use all sorts of beauty products to make herself more beautiful, but in comparison to this woman, Mom looked stingy. Closing the mirror, I walked over to the shower and pushed the shower curtain aside. As I did so, another cockroach crawled past me out the door. What was up with this place and cockroaches? Did this woman have an infestation or something? Shaking my head, I looked closely at the shower and suddenly saw something behind one of the shampoo bottles on the shelf next to the shower head. Pushing the shampoo bottle aside, I found a small piece of black fabric which looked like the same fabric as the sniper's suit. What do you think? I said. A clue? Possibly, though I don't see how this piece of fabric could have gotten here, said TW. Unless that is, the sniper took a nice shower before he killed Barron. Always a possibility, I said jokingly. In any case, this looks like the only piece of evidence I can find. Guess it's time to leave. Good idea, said TW. I'll scan the fabric when we get back home and see if I can find any DNA strands on it that might be able to point us to the killer's real identity. You can do that? I can do a lot of things, said TW. Or, at least, the Trickshot watch can. I still haven't shown you all of its abilities yet, but yes, DNA scanning is one of them, though one of its more mundane powers, if I say so myself. I found myself wondering how a DNA scanning watch that could connect to the internet and match a DNA profile with the DNA database could be described as mundane, but decided that I had more important things to do than wonder about that. I put the fabric in the pocket of my suit, did a last cursory check of the bathroom again to make sure I didn't overlook anything, and then walked over to the door, which I opened and walked out of. Just as I stepped out of the bathroom, my foot caught something and I found myself suddenly hanging upside down from the ceiling from what felt like a spider web. I didn't know what happened. One moment, I was standing on my own 2 feet on the carpeted flooring of the apartment. The next, I was hanging upside down from the ceiling due to what felt like a spider web around my ankles, the piece of fabric I picked up falling out of my pocket onto the ground below. Looking upwards, I realized that I was hanging upside down by a giant spider web, which was wrapped tightly around my ankles. Due to its strength, however, it felt more like a steel chain than a spider web. What the hell? I said. Where did this webbing come from? It came from me, murderer, said a sharp voice with a slight buzz to it. Your days of assassinating superheroes in broad daylight is over. I looked over in the direction from which the voice came. At first, it was hard to see due to the low light conditions of the apartment, but then a figure stepped out of the bedroom on the other side of the apartment and closed the door behind him. I almost gasped when I saw him, because I knew who this figure was all too well: Bugbite, the official superhero of the city of Rumsfeld. He wore an insect-like helmet over his face and a green bodysuit that reminded me of grasshoppers. He was tall, and, though a bit on the thin side, powerfully built, with a utility belt around his waist which held all sorts of gadgets inside. He also had 2 wrist knives attached to his wrists, though they were currently retracted where I couldn't see them at the moment. "Bugbite?" I said in surprise. "Were you waiting for me this entire time?" Bugbite nodded as he walked over to me. "Correct, murderer. I suspected that you would return to the scene of the crime at some point, so I left a couple of cockroaches here to keep an eye on the place while I was away. As soon as you appeared, the cockroaches contacted me and let me know you were here, no doubt for nefarious reasons." All of Bugbite's talk about cockroach spies would have sounded crazy to anyone else, but it didn't sound crazy to me. It was common knowledge that Bugbite had the ability to communicate with and control insects and bugs of all sorts, ranging from tiny ants to large beetles and everything in between, even from a distance. It wasn't as flashy as super strength or cool as perfect aiming, but there was a reason why Bugbite was Rumsfeld's official superhero. "Where did this webbing come from?" I said, glancing up at the ceiling. "I didn't know you could produce web." "I can't," said Bugbite, stopping several feet away from me. "It's a special concoction I made based on my studies of webbing. Prior to becoming a superhero, I studied entomology, with a special focus on spiders. I used my knowledge of spider webbing to make artificial webbing, though it is still very much a prototype, which is why I haven't used it out in the field just yet. This is the first time I've tested it against a real enemy." "For a prototype, it's pretty good," I said, tugging at the webbing again. "Feels like steel." "That's because it doesn't just mimic spider webbing but improves upon it," said Bugbite. He raised a fist. "It's what separates us from the animals, our ability to improve upon nature. It is why natural selection made us the dominant species on Earth, and why we will continue to rule over the Earth well into the future." I had forgotten that Bugbite was a science nerd, kind of like Kyle, except his interests were mostly focused on nature and insects. But I really wasn't in any position to mock him for his nerdy interest in insects, given how it was that same nerdy interest which had allowed him to synthesize a fake webbing that was as strong as a steel cable. That was why Bugbite was such an effective superhero. Though he lacked super strength or speed, he had a brilliant mind, which was a dangerous weapon in its own right. "Yeah, that's cool and all, but you've got the wrong guy," I said. "I didn't kill Baron Glory. It was a sniper dressed in all black." "Liar," said Bugbite. "I saw Baron's body. I saw the small disc embedded in the back of his skull, the same discs you're known to use. And given how I have 3 PhDs in 3 separate but demanding scientific fields, you would be unwise to try to fool me with your obvious lies." "Obvious lies?" I repeated. "Look, man, I'm not lying about anything. I'm innocent, even if I can't prove it." "Only a court of law can prove your innocence," said Bugbite. "Or, far more likely, your guilt." I gulped. "Listen, Bugbite, I know you don't like me that much because I've been stepping on your turf, but you've got to realize that I'm not a killer. I've never killed anyone. I'm just trying to do the right thing." Bugbite regarded me with cold eyes. "When you first appeared in Rumsfeld, I was unsure what to make of you. You obviously weren't the original trickshot, Gregory MacDonald, but you did seem like a criminal or supervillain. I thought you might be a decent guy, but it is now as obvious as daylight to me that you are no different from the Injectors or any other criminal scum I've fought." It was clear to me that I wasn't going to be able to convince Bugbite that I was innocent, which meant I had no choice but to fight. I pulled a disc out of my pouch and threw it at the webbing. The disc cut through the webbing with ease, but instead of falling to the floor, I flew toward Bugbite and swung a fist at his face. But Bugbite dodged the punch and, grabbing my outstretched arm, threw me over his shoulder across the apartment. I crashed into the wall, almost through it, but I just left a big hole shaped like myself. Shaking my head, I looked up in time to see Bugbite running toward me with his wrist knives out. He slashed at my face, but I dodged at the last second, rolling to the side. As soon as I got back to my feet, I pulled 2 discs out of my pouch and hurled them at him, but Bugbite deflected them both with his wrist knives and leaped toward me with his blades flashing. I flew forward, narrowly avoiding his blades, and made my way to the window. I didn't need to fight Bugbite. I just needed to get out of here before the police got here. I could probably beat Bug Bite in a fight, but I didn't hate him and didn't want to hurt him, because Bug Bite was not the real enemy here. But I didn't get very far before Bug Bite leaped through the air toward me and tackled me out of the air. We crashed on top of the coffee table in the middle of the apartment, which fell apart under our collective weight, and immediately began struggling with each other. Bug Bite kept trying to stab me in the face, while I held back his hands as much as I could, though Bug Bite was so vicious that I had to work harder than usual to keep my face from being torn apart. "I don't want to fight you," I said through gritted teeth. "You've got the wrong guy." "That's what every murderer says when he's confronted about his crimes," said Bug Bite. "I've heard that excuse 1,000,000 times. Do you really think I'm going to believe you now?" That was it. I activated my super strength and crushed Bug Bite's wrists, my fingers crunching the wrist knives. Bug Bite cried out in pain, but I didn't care. I just threw him off me at the couch, which he crashed into hard enough to knock over. I jumped to my feet and ran toward the windows, but then I tripped over something and fell onto the floor. I broke my fall with my hands, but the fall jarred me nonetheless. Shaking my head, I looked over my shoulder and saw that I had tripped over some house shoes I had not noticed. It was embarrassing, but I didn't care. I just got back to my feet. But before I could do anything, I heard a very faint buzzing sound coming from the nearby fireplace. At first, I thought it was just a fly or something, but the sound was growing louder and louder very quickly, as though there was an entire swarm of insects coming down the fireplace. I heard a laugh behind me and looked over my shoulder to see Bug Bite. He was rising to his feet, though his wrists looked almost broken, and he held his hands in an awkward way. Despite his injuries, Bug Bite was chuckling under his breath, like he had just heard a great joke. "What are you laughing about?" I said. "And what is making that buzzing sound?" Bug Bite tilted his head to the side. "My bees, of course." Before I could respond to that, an entire swarm of bees exploded from the fireplace and surrounded me like a cloud. There had to be millions and millions of the bastards, enough that I couldn't see anything. They surrounded me on all sides, swooping in and stinging me on every part of my skin. My costume, thankfully, protected most of my body from their stingers, but the constant buzzing and thick swarming around me was still disorienting. I swung my fists back and forth, but it was like trying to punch air. For every bee I managed to hit, 1,000,000 more would take its place. Eventually, I stopped trying to hit the bees at all and just brought my arms around my head to protect my face from their stingers. All that did was make their assault on me even worse. The buzzing was so loud that I couldn't even hear my own thoughts anymore. I staggered around, trying to make my way to the window, but the swarm of bees was so thick that I had no idea where I was anymore. It was like I was caught in a storm in the middle of the ocean, only this storm hurt. All of a sudden, Bug Bite appeared within the swarm of bees and slashed at my chest. His knife cut deeply through my costume and my chest, making me cry out in pain and fall to the floor. As soon as I fell, the bees ceased swarming around me, instead hovering up to the ceiling, where they buzzed loudly, though their buzzing was a lot more muted than it had been just moments before. Bug Bite stood over me, his chest heaving in and out with every breath. He raised his knife above his head and said, "This is the end. Trick shot. In another time, perhaps you and I could have been allies, but here and now we are enemies, and I never show mercy to my enemies." Bug Bite brought his knife down on me. Right before it hit me, however, I raised my arm and caught the knife directly in my forearm. I had never been stabbed with a knife before. The worst I'd ever experienced was accidentally cutting my finger when I was chopping up carrots for Mom when I was helping her make dinner once back when I was 10. Even then, the cut had been pretty shallow and healed after being bandaged for a week. So when the sharp knife plunged into my forearm, I was unprepared for the pain that shot through my body. I screamed louder than I'd ever screamed in my life. I yanked my arm away, pulling the knife out of my arm at the same time, while Bug Bite looked at me in surprise, as if he had not expected me to respond that way. But even in my pain state, I saw an opportunity. I slammed my other fist directly in Bug Bite's gut. Bug Bite doubled over, gasping in surprise before I delivered another uppercut that knocked him flat on his back. He hit the floor hard and lay there, clearly unconscious. I rose to my feet, grasping my bleeding arm and cursing foully under my breath. Even just rising to my feet was a Herculean task because the pain in my bleeding arm was so great that I could think of little else. I suppose I should have been happy that I managed to knock out Bug Bite, but it was hard to be happy when I was suffering from some of the worst pain I'd ever experienced in my life. It was even worse than when I broke my collarbone when I was 6, which had been so bad that I practically cried myself dry. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the buzzing bee swarm above. Looking at the ceiling, I saw that the bees were starting to lose their cohesion. It occurred to me that without bug bite to control them, the bees would soon stop being a collective. And once they did, they might be a big problem. At the very least, they might try to sting me again. Breathing hard, I walked over to the window, though each step was painful due to my arm. I pulled back my other arm, and gathering all of my strength, smashed the window out. Without waiting to see if the bees would follow, I jumped out the window and flew away as fast as I could, going up high into the sky to avoid being spotted by pedestrians on the street. But I couldn't stay up in the sky very long. My bleeding arm was practically dumping blood, and the sharp, cold wind made it hard for me to focus. I was forced to land on the roof of the Rumsfeld First National Bank, which was not very far from the apartment building I had just been in, though there were a couple of buildings between the bank and the apartment, so I wasn't afraid that one of the apartment dwellers might see me. Gripping my forearm, I sat down on the rough roof and groaned. TW flashed into existence before me, a concerned look on his face. TW, is there anything you can do about my arm? I said, my voice tighter than usual due to the pain. Well, it's like I told you when you first put the suit on. Your costume doesn't have healing capabilities, said TW apologetically. If it were just a small, surface-level wound or something like that, your suit would heal it up by itself. Unfortunately, that knife went very deep in your forearm, so you will need to see an actual doctor to fix it. I winced. I wished you wouldn't say that. Can the suit dull the pain until I can get to an actual doctor? At least. Yes, and staunch the bleeding as well, said TW. Look. Before my startled eyes, the part of my suit which had been torn apart by Bug Bite's knife slowly, but surely began to cover my arm. Soon the suit had repaired itself and was even applying pressure to the wound, causing the bleeding to pretty much stop, though it still hurt a lot. Ha, I said, twisting my arm around. Interesting. I didn't know it could do that. It's useful, but not actual healing, said TW. As I said, you will need to find an actual doctor if you want your arm fixed. The suit can't heal a wound that deep, unfortunately. But I don't know who I could go to, I said. I can't go home like this. If I did, Mom and Dad would want to know where I got this wound from, and the last thing I need them to know is that I'm trick shot, especially since the police still think I'm the guy who killed Baron Glory. Don't you have a family doctor you could go to for surgery? Said TW. Surely there must be a doctor you and your family go to regularly for checkups, at least. There is, I said, Dr. Gonzalez, who works at the Jones-Gonzalez Health Clinic. But if I go to him, he'll just tell my parents, which will result in them finding out my identity, which will put us right back where we started. This is a troubling problem indeed, said TW, stroking his chin. I'm not quite sure what to do. Whenever Gregory suffered any serious injuries like this, he would always go to his local doctor to get fixed up. Of course, Gregory was a legally licensed superhero, so he didn't have a secret identity to keep hidden like you do. Your situation is more complex. Tell me something I don't know, I said. The pain in my arm flared and I grabbed it again. Stupid Bug Bite. Stabbing me in the arm, dang it, that hurt. Now I know why so many criminals are afraid of him. I'd be scared of him, too, if I was a criminal. Technically, you are a criminal, said TW, since you operate as a superhero without a license, which is against the law in this country. Whose side are you on, TW? I said in annoyance. TW shrugged, just pointing out the obvious. I wasn't much in the mood to hear about the obvious right now, but I decided it was fruitless to argue with TW about this. Okay, fine, whatever. Just help me find a doctor or something, will you? I'm not going home until I do. As I said, I don't know where to look for one, said TW. Of course, I could do an internet search of all the available hospitals and health clinics in the city, but given your desire to keep this particular wound a secret, I don't think that would be very helpful. Yeah, it wouldn't, I said. I gripped my forearm in a failed attempt to dull the pain, but I can't go home until I get this fixed. I just can't. TW stroked his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. Clearly, this is a terrible dilemma for you. On one hand, you can't just spend all night out here on the roof of the bank, but on the other hand, you also cannot go home in this condition without revealing your secret identity to your parents. Furthermore, you cannot go to any of the hospitals or health clinics in the city for the same reason. Thanks for the recap, TW, I said sarcastically. It isn't like we just went over all of that like 2 seconds ago. I'm merely recapping the information for my own benefit, said TW. It is useful to summarize a situation for oneself in order to make sure one understands exactly what is going on. Failure to do so can mean acting hastily, and acting hastily is never a good thing. A little haste certainly wouldn't hurt me right now, I said. I sighed. All right. It looks like my only real chance is to go home and tell my parents about my secret identity. Maybe, once they get over the shock of me being a superhero, they'll agree to take me to the hospital. It's not perfect, but... Actually, I don't think you'll need to do that at all, said TW. There is another option, a way to get your arm healed without having to reveal your secret identity to anyone. There is, I said, but didn't you just say that the suit can't heal this injury? I did, but I'm not saying we should use the suit, said TW. I'm saying I know someone who can help. But you also said that you didn't know of any doctors who could help me. The person I am thinking of isn't a doctor, said TW. At least not officially. But she is good with medicine and healing, and she's right here in Rumsfeld, Texas. Really? I said. I rose to my feet slowly. Then why don't we leave and find her right away? Because I am not entirely sure if she's still around or not, said TW. She was a friend of Gregory back during his superhero days, but I don't know if she's even still alive. She was a very old woman back then, even older than Gregory. The reason I didn't bring her up right away was because of her age, which may have rendered her useless. Then that just gives us even more reason to hurry, I said. The only way to know if she can help us is if we go and find her. Tell me where she is, and I'll fly there as fast as I can. I suppose you have a point, said TW. Very well. Let us take to the skies. I'll give you directions as we go. The end of the Legacy Superhero Season 2, Episode 3, Into the Shadows.